Right.
Welcome back, everyone. As you know by now, I am Jennifer Bulbrook with I Am Somebody, and my co host, Isabel Bradburn Jackson, with Dear Divine Goddess. And we're putting together this docu-series, Lost Souls Initiative, and where we're taking people's stories and sharing them with the world. And today, please welcome our guest, Jennifer from the Hub. I guess you're the founder of the Hub, if I recall correctly, Isabel told me.
Yep.
Okay. Welcome. It's nice to meet you. This is my first time meeting you, and to be quite honest, I'm not even a whole sure what about the hub is. So I'm going to be learning just as much as the listeners and viewers are. So please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name is Jennifer Bonner, and I am the co-founder and executive director of an organization called the Hamilton Hub. We are a small local not-for-profit. And yeah, so I am happy to do this and talk about what's really going on in community from a frontline perspective.
Well, we're happy to have you. Sorry, Isabel, go ahead.
No, let's go right ahead.
I was just going to ask if you can tell us a little bit what the hub actually is.
Sure.
Is it like a resource for people? What is it actually?
Yeah, so the hub initially started out, so we were actually driven like COVID kind of dropped us, a nice little present in March of 2020 when the stay-at-home orders came in place. And can I swear on this thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
We swear. Back in the day when we couldn't even get into a goddamn Tim Hortons and get our coffee in the morning, you can imagine how difficult it was for someone who was living unhoused to even wash their hands and to like make access to a bathroom. And so there was a whole bunch of doctors who deemed it like really like a health crisis out in community for folks that were living unhoused. And so they started up these things called rest and hygiene centers. And there was 3 of us in the city. And the rest and hygiene centers operated throughout the day at various hours. And our team, myself as a volunteer and a whole bunch of volunteer medical students and social service providers took over the 5 to 9 drop-in rest and hygiene center, which was located at Main and McNabb. We were just like in a church basement. And, our job was to just let people in, use the bathroom, get a coffee, that sort of thing. So really basic needs, just allowing people to, bird bath in the bathroom if that's what they needed to do to clean themselves up, that sort of thing. So then in December of 2020, the city was like, oh, COVID's going away. We're going to pull all this funding. There's no need for these rest and hygiene centers anymore. And what actually happened was we argued that point. We had been sitting with folks in our space 4 hours a night, having like actual conversation and getting to know what was really going on with folks. And we were seeing all these gaps in the social safety net that weren't being covered despite COVID. So there was a lot of things that people were struggling with and making access to resources and being connected with resources and restrictions and all of the things that were in place for folks. And those were real challenges. And so we kind of took a risk and we just we talked to some local providers, and we were really lucky that our friends here at Philpott Church had an empty building that wasn't being used. And they said, sure, come on over here, use this building. And so we rebranded to the Hub and started our own services. And since then, we have expanded to have we still do our 5 to 9 drop-in. That's like our grassroots program where folks who are unhoused in community, even those like in community who are maybe housed but experiencing food insecurity, they get to come in here every single night between 5 and 9 and get a hot meal, pick up, clothing, things like that. Real just basic needs, access to resources in a place where there's no stigmatization around drug use, around all of those things. Are pretty super low barrier. So a lot of the times we'll even have people in here who maybe are in psychosis and would have been restricted from other places. But at the end of the day, they still need to eat and drink, man. So like, figure it out, right? You just got to manage some of the behaviors in the space and do the best you can to make sure that people have what they need. So we still do the 5 to 9. We've also expanded to have a full medical clinic on site. So 5 days a week, we have doctors or nurses in our space from 1 to 4. And again, low barrier access to, medications. If you are looking for, substance use support, there's doctors here who can do prescriptions for you and help you out with that. And then also wound care, which is a big one for the folks living unhoused. And then STI testing, rapid HIV, Hep C, which we know is, part of like a harm reduction approach. And even clean supplies, right? Sometimes, reducing and looking at it from a harm reduction lens is really, really important. Stigmatizing people and working from an abstinence-based lens isn't working, or we wouldn't fucking be here in the first place, man. But that's just that is the issue right now, is that everybody has these kind of buzzwords about harm reduction, trauma informed, all this sort of stuff. But really, what the hell are we doing? We're presenting charitable models in community, and those don't work for everybody. And that is a problem. Charitable organizations and Christian-based models are actually what run social services in Hamilton. And that can be stigmatizing for people, and we don't think about things outside the box. So we have the clinic, we have our 5 to 9 drop-in, and we, in the last year and a half, have actually launched our high-risk youth management program. So those are really super high-risk kids, those in the guns and gang space, those who have frequent or chronic offenders, folks with serious substance use, kids that aren't being touched at other services, and understanding that youth for us is 17 to 25-year-olds. So most services for youth in Hamilton end at 21. But y'all know, like, if a kid's smoking weed since he was 12 years old, his brain isn't developed. And you have boys, I have boys. We know at 18 years old, they can't make critical decisions, right? But yet we have institutions that tell them that they should be able to do that. And so, we kick these kids out of youth programs and we send them into adult systems of both justice and social services, and they can't navigate the system in the way that they need to. So just some service navigation around that. We do a lot of justice support, working with folks inside and outside the jails, and understanding that, for everyone who lives in these communities, there's a good portion of them who, social workers are the worst people in their lives, right? They took them away from their families in CAS when they were young. They wrote them up, they maybe put them in jail. They had some mandated court requirements. They did all of those things. And so you kind of had to be different, right? You had to be yourself and be authentic, and you couldn't be those mandated reporters that we all know exist out here as social service providers. So we've made a conscious decision here that if you work in our space, and if you that we don't want you to be a mandated reporter, because you're going to hear some things and you need to build trust with folks in community. Don't get me wrong, like, if there is serious community harm, there is some discussions that have to happen, but we're very transparent about that with our clients. But honestly, the kid stole the wallet. It's not my fucking problem, man. It's like, go deal with, that. But, so there's some real issues in community, but you need to build trust on the ground. You need to build boots on the ground. And so while everybody else was closed for 2 years, we were hitting the streets and we were talking to these youth. We were in parks and street corners, and, anywhere you would see boys posted up, we were standing out there. As you go to E-Block, you go to all those places. That was us, man. We were out there at 2 and 3 in the morning, saying hello to folks. And at first they thought, who the fuck are these white women coming in here? Like, who are these girls? Like, what is right? So there was like a whole lot of testing that happened in that process. But being able to stand in those spaces and have people do business around you, or have people make phone calls, and like, those are all tests, right? And you got to know where to stand your ground and when not to stand your ground in those spaces. And we did, I think, a pretty good job, because it ended up being that, some of those elders, those leaders would be like, okay, in their lives, there always had to be a motive, right? There is always a motive. And we really didn't have a motive. Sometimes we would show up, we'd drop off pizza and we'd leave. And they're like, what the fuck just happened, right? Next time we'd show up and we would drop off cold drinks and then leave. This is 2 and 3 in the morning in the local parks and hangout areas. And so people just ended up being curious about who we are and what the hell we were doing. So instead of just dropping pizzas, it turned out to be invited on those benches, sitting next to them, eating a slice of pizza and talking to each other as people. without any stigma attached to that, without them knowing that, you know, the phone stayed in our pockets, man. Like we never picked up our phone. There was no fear that we were going to report or call or do anything. And just getting to know each other. And then the trust was developed along the food chain. So what happened was some of the younger kids were able to get a one-on-one with us or go for a ride with us. And there was some trust in that. And then of course, you know, I have some lived experience with folks out here. And so there was some credibility to be added with that as well. So, you know, we'd leverage people we knew in community. You know, the best credible messengers are those, the aunties who live in those communities, that, you know, the young guys, the older guys that maybe knew us from back in the day, right? Use those things to get yourself into places. And they're the ones who run their communities. And we really need to be looking at, you know, social services as community placemaking, right? Because the person who knows, you know, like I grew up in a Hamilton housing survey. Nobody knows what happened in that survey except the people who lived there. So why not let the people who live there organize and do things and help each other out, instead of, you know, stigmatizing people. So, and making it a social service job. We need to help each other out in those communities and build that sort of sustainable environment for people. So that's kind of our model, is to like look at community placemaking, talk about credible messengers and who they are, and leverage them to get into these communities and to fix families as a whole, right? Like, you know, Absolutely. One of the big things that we talk about is everybody's so afraid of, you know, gun violence and drugs and all these sort of things. But that's actually like, it's a public health crisis is what it is. It is not a guns and gangs issue. It is not a guns issue. It is a public health crisis. All of those things lead to violence, right? You know, poor families, poverty. We all know why kids join gangs, right? But I think what people forget, because they're paralyzed because of the fear, is they forget the fact that they're also the ones seeking connection the most, or they wouldn't be run into these places. So how do you connect with them to make sure that you're building those healthy assets in people? And looking at this from a, there's a model called the Sustainable Livelihoods model that really talks about building healthy assets in people for long-term behavioral change. You know, we can't arrest our way out of problems right now, right? We have the perfect storm. We have a housing crisis. We have a mental health crisis. We have a drug poisoning crisis. We have, you know, a food insecurity crisis. We have all of those things happening at once. And it's the perfect storm for violence to erupt in communities. And so in order to make things better, you need to look at communities as a whole, and every community is very different. We have a lot of communities in our city that are very cultural. So you need to make sure that you're addressing the cultural things in there. We talk about certain cultures that maybe treat women differently than other cultures. And, you know, we also have a lot of refugees and folks who have come here seeking asylum, who maybe, you know, in their own countries had to have a gun in their hand at 9 years old. So what's the fear of doing it now? Right? So like, let's talk about those things. Let's discuss those things. Let's talk about what it means to be a man. Let's talk about how we mediate things. And you can't do any of that if you don't have in relationships. And the problem is that we've made everything so black and white in intake processes from social service providers that it's pretty hard for someone to check the box, and all of those questions feel stigmatizing, and they are not trauma informed. So like, stop asking the questions, and you shouldn't be asking any of those questions if you don't have a relationship with someone. That is what trauma informed is. So, you know, everybody uses these buzzwords, but I'm not sure that everybody knows exactly what they mean. So our services have provided all of those things. Yeah, so we've been here 3 years. We just got our not-for-profit in December. Prior to that, we were privately funded. We had a lot of donors. And actually, I did this for 2 years without a salary, as did some of my colleagues. We did this as volunteers. And the other thing that we chose to do is really keep the students very specific. And the student bodies that we have are both medical students and folks who are going to be police officers or correction officers. And, you know, people think that's weird in social services because there's this whole movement about anti-policing and all that sort of stuff. The truth is, guys, like, cops aren't going away. So like, why not teach some to be better at it? Give them more tools in their toolbox, expose them to these things, let them build relationships in their community, let them see what a drug-induced psychosis looks like, let them meet a gang entrenched youth, and talk to them as a person in a safe space where they get to learn something, and take away
so
the
they can
power
have a little more
dynamics.
compassion when they're on the job.
That's right. And take away the power dynamics, right? We employed some of these youth, and we employed some folks who are living unhoused in our city, and we put them right behind the counter with the police officer, with the fucking medical student that maybe is from China and maybe hasn't had any exposure to homeless people. And guess what? Y'all got paid the same salary to serve the same cup of coffee to the same person living unhoused in our community. So there's no power dynamic there, right? You're all getting paid the same thing. You're all doing the same job. And you are forced to talk to people as people, and not stats and not all of those things. And so the fear goes away, and maybe those two institution-based fields have an understanding that is different than they had from their academic work. I don't think we do a good job in the academic side of teaching how to do that in a really safe way. We teach police officers about use of force training. We teach them some de-escalation skills, but we don't teach them how to use the discretion that they have, and when that discretion is important and when it's not important, and what could happen if you have a relationship with someone. There is no question that social service providers in Hamilton, every single space, there is guns in our spaces, there is drugs in our spaces, there is knives in our spaces. All of those things are real, folks. Like, it just doesn't go away, right? Unless everybody's got metal detectors, which I know we don't have because there's no sustainable funding. But anyways, it's here. So rather than be afraid of it, address it head on. And if you have a relationship with people, you're going to be able to de-escalate those situations in a way that others can't. And that's been our experience here. So we're super proud of the work we're doing, and we've been very quiet in the background in terms of publicizing some of those stats and keeping that sort of on the down low for the last little while. But we did receive a provincial grant recently from Trillium to push forward some of this youth agenda work and really focus on youth mental health. And so just in this last 3 months, we have had 6 youth, all male, all BIPOC youth, who have come in and done STI tests, like a really simple thing, right? As far as I'm concerned, that's a fucking win, man. Like, guess what? Sure. Right? I've reduced community harm. I've done all the things. And they felt safe to do that. We have 4 of them going through actual mental health assessments right now to find out what's really going on, right? And we accompany them to those appointments, so it's not scary. We walk them through the process. We make sure that the representation in the room for them from a psychiatry or a therapist perspective looks like them, sounds like them, is able to understand their culture and who they are. And so I think that's been a big part of it. And for us, I mean, me and Liz are just 2 white women, right? Like, and, privileged at that, essentially. So we recognize that, we know that. And so we know we have to incorporate all of those voices, and we use these kids to do it, man. They're the leaders, they're the speakers. Anybody who's out here doing anything is an entrepreneur. So give them a chance to develop what that looks like in a safe way. So that's kind of the goal of the hub, and the mental health and addictions piece is a big part of that, both for our unhoused community and for our youth.
That's amazing. Like, all of that is just, and I didn't even know you existed, to be honest. And so it's just amazing that that's all of the work that is being done. And this is like one of the reasons why I wanted to do this docu-series, to get these resources out there to people, and so that people can know about them and can utilize them. I think, it's like what Isabel and I were talking about before, was, the government and that, like, it's the wrong people trying to fix these situations. We need to talk to the people who are dealing with the situations, who are in the situations, who are experiencing it. And I think that's what you're all about. And I really think that's just amazing, and just really putting the healthcare workers and the police involved as if like they're all equal, right? They're all somebody. It doesn't matter what. and really being able to do that. So I just, yeah, like I think it's absolutely amazing everything you do. And I think that going through and volunteering at the hub should be mandatory for police officers so that they can relate to
Well,
people on a more better, you have a better relationship, so that, you know, we're not seeing these shootings and these all, you know, all these things happening, and we can really reduce those.
well, I can tell you that the Mohawk College team has been really supportive of that. The Advanced Police Foundation's course and the Police Foundation's course asked us to come back and speak, but they wanted us earlier this year. So we are going there first week of school to get these kids involved. Every single one of their students that came through last year's program now has an offer on various police forces across the country. And so how do you build systemic change? You do it from the ground up, right? So now these guys get to go in, they get to go teach their training officers that no, you don't have to kick the guy when he's getting in the back of the paddy wagon. No, you don't have to pull out your gun. There is a less lethal way to do that. No, you know, you don't have to approach him in that way. We can talk it out, you know, those sort of things. So they get to bring all of those tools to the workforce. But Mohawk College has been really, really receptive to that, as has Mac, for the doctors, because, you know, and is you and myself have sat in these emergency rooms and listened to doctors and nurses stigmatize folks sitting in those rooms, in those, you know, triage areas and that sort of thing. And it can be really disheartening. And you know, I'm not quiet when that happens. But I also know that fighting the Ministry of Long-Term Health, fighting, you know, the Safety Canada, or, you know, corrections, the Solicitor General, all that stuff takes time. And I probably won't see it in my lifetime. So what can I contribute to the community? I contribute some training and some different skills and build it from the bottom up, as opposed to trying to fight it from the top down, because that hasn't been working. We've been doing it for 30 years, man. So,
and you've planted the seeds, so those seeds grow, and those seeds, you know, multiply. You know yourself, just the work that you did with the football foundation and stuff like that, like the kids that you've seen come through there, Jen, like we both know, like they're great freaking kids. They get themselves jammed up because of, you know, the life that they lived, or, you know, their trauma, you know, childhood trauma, but like they're good kids, and they deserve it. They deserve a chance. They deserve help. They deserve it all.
Yep. And it's the same thing with folks that are living unhoused in our community. I think there's this brush that's painted, especially now when tempers are flaring and parks are filling up and there's a bunch of things going on, that people are just like really cruel to each other and don't really understand all the nuances. I think that, you know, there's a lot of people who believe that everyone who lives in encampment is an addict, which is very untrue. I think, you know, the homelessness comes first before the addiction for a lot of these folks. And I think that's the piece that people forget. You know, and then obviously those who are struggling with addictions, well, where the hell would you like me to send them? Because I have personally experienced trying to do those referrals and they don't work. And you can't get people in. There is no mental health beds. There is no addictions bed. Go to detox, right? Go to detox for 10 days. Sure, if you can get a bed, you're probably a 4 or 5 day wait. By then, who knows what's happened in your life where that may or may not seem feasible. Oh, and also call every day at 8 o'clock. So the guy who lives in a homeless encampment who doesn't have a phone has to call every day at 8 o'clock to see if there's a bed available. Well, how the fuck does he do that? Right? It doesn't happen in that way. And then also you go to detox, you can't even have a smoke. You're taking everything else away from them. You can't have a smoke.
Yeah.
Right? So, you know, if you're losing your freaking mind, what's the first thing you want to do? For me, it's go out and smoke and a coffee. Well, you can't do that thing. So how do you keep people there? What do you do? So there has been some significant work happening in the background with various groups to talk about what those best practices need to look like in order to support people and keep them through the system. So we are working very hard, and there seems to be some buy-in from council and local organizations to sort of reframe some of that. I think harm reduction has become a little bit of a push at the moment because the drug poisoning crisis is so ridiculous.
Yeah.
But we also can't force organizations like, say, the Salvation Army to do something that's against their ethical policies because they are a Christian-based organization who believes in abstinence and that God is going to save them. So how do I tell them to hand out harm reduction supplies? Right? You actually can't do that legally. Their funders won't accept it. There's a whole bunch of rules around that. But what the city can do is, create policies around, okay, if you can't do it, where can they go? What does that look like? What are the best policies for that? So we had this whole conversation, and there is some documentation floating around. There's a lot of working groups in trying to make that happen. Truth of the matter is, I don't know if it's going to, but we're pushing and we're doing the best we can. And it's not just me. I have lots of friends in community. Soapin is another one who's doing really great work. Olivia Mancini, you can follow her on Twitter or Instagram. She's really great at putting that information out. Soapin's another great organization. So these really grassroots organizations are the ones pushing this agenda, right? Because Good Shepherd, Mission Services, Salvation Army, who own every shelter in our city, Indwell, the VAW shelters, all of that, they're all Christian-based models. And so there's this ethical challenges for them about how they manage that. But we need municipal funding, we need federal funding, we need provincial funding around more addictions beds, more opportunities for rehab. Someone can go to detox. Sure, they can go to detox, do their 7 days in detox if they make it through without having a smoke. And then they have to wait 6 months to go to a rehab facility that is publicly funded because nobody can afford the private ones. And guess what? In the meantime, they're sent back to shelter, they're sent back to encampments, they're sent back to places where they were escaping in the first place. So all of those demons come to fruition again in that window that they are waiting. So then when they finally have a bed ready for them, guess what? They can't go because you have to be clean for 7 days.
Yeah.
So there's like this whole pushback. It just doesn't make sense. The way the system is set up doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
No,
I 100% agree.
It definitely needs to be revamped.
Yeah. I think we need to be having these transition homes where you can, and something that, deals with it all, not just one thing, and then you send them off to another person, because you want to build a relationship with people. And a lot of times I know with myself going in and out of detox and therapy and all that stuff, and having a different therapist and a different person to talk to, I didn't want to tell my story over and over and over again. And especially when I didn't think that a lot of it even was why I was even mattered, right? So and it just, and so this is like I'm saying, like, transition home is like, my goal is what I would like to do is have transition homes everywhere and really take it and deal with all of the issues and really work with the people and work with the person to, go from the ground up to being, volunteering, working, and getting all that kind of stuff, education and home and all that stuff.
If you're a rich person, you can get that if you're a rich
exactly
person.
Right.
You can get that if you're a person in the little or lower or middle class person. The average person doesn't have access to those things. You got $70,000 to spend on rehab. Go ahead, man. You can get all of those things in one spot. You will have the same counselor. You'll have all the pro supports you need. But anyone who comes from a different life does not have access to that. That is not how the provincial system works. The referral process is skewed. The data is skewed. All of it is skewed, and we can't formulate things in community if we don't have the right data going in. And we're not asking the right people, right? We're asking folks that work at shelter services. We're asking folks, all those Christian models that I just talked about, that's who we're asking for the data. So the data is skewed because we're not walking out into those encampments and talking to the people that live in those encampments to see what they actually need to make that work for them and when they're ready. And that's the other thing, when they're ready. So how do we support people without stigmatizing them, without doing that? And it's all about harm reduction and mitigating risk, right? Everyone that is listening to this podcast puts on their seatbelt when they get in a car. It's freaking harm reduction, man. It's harm reduction. Right? You put a bicycle helmet on your kid when you send him outside, but we don't think about that in the same way for folks who use substances, and it is the exact same thing. Those are all harm reduction.
It's because of all of the stigma around it. And I think until somebody has somebody that they love in their life dealing with all of these things, they don't get it, because it's easy to just walk by and judge and, oh, go get a job. Like, really and truly, if they could get a job, they would be working.
How do you get a job when you don't have an address? How do you get a job when you don't have a piece of ID? How do you get a job when you don't have, and they're like, oh, you know, you should be able to get that from the government. Sure. So I will tell you right now, what has to happen. You can't have a shower
every day when you don't have clean clothes to put on every day. When
you don't know what time you have to get up. Right? So I have folks who want to work. I've got guys who pick up jobs every day, like they do cash jobs or whatever, right? But like the truth is you have these people come in, they want to go get a job. Okay, well, in order to do that, you need to have an address that people can send information to, right? So OW will help you get your, you know, your work gear to get you started. Maybe right now, discretionary funds are on hold. So you actually aren't going to get that right now.
Yep.
So you actually can't get that. So then, you know, oh, okay, well, they need a piece of ID because they have to be vetted in order to get in to work in these landscaping jobs in someone's private backyard. They're not going to pass a criminal records check. So how are you going to vet them? Right? So there's lots of people who want to work because actually work reduces risk for them because their hands are busy, their minds are busy, all of those things. But they can't get a job because they need all those things. And when some social worker goes, oh, you go here for that, you go here for that, you go here for that, you go here for that. But they didn't give them transportation money to get to all those places. They didn't tell them what time they had to book appointments for. They didn't say, oh, the worker's got to call you back. Oh, wait, I don't have a phone. How do I reach you? Oh, then I don't know how to help you. You know, so like there's all kinds of barriers in there that people don't understand. There is lots of people who want to work in these encampments. It's a matter of how we get them there.
Absolutely.
And how we can do that. So it's frustrating to like read some of that, and I have to bite my tongue sometimes when I'm watching some of these like social media groups because I obviously attached to an agency, but you know what I have to say about a lot of that is, you know me.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I know. And you know, like it doesn't, like I say all the time, like it doesn't cost anything to help these people do these things. Time, a little bit of time to even have a conversation with somebody and say, okay, how can I help you do this? How can I help you do that? Like a freaking piece of identification is like what, $15? So like help them. Help somebody in your, you know.
In order to get a purple ID card, which is the thing you need to rent a vehicle, to rent any of those things, right? If you don't get a hotel room, whatever, they're $35. But in order to get the purple ID card, you have to have a health card or at least a picture ID card. Then you have to have a birth certificate. Well, guess what? If you are a product of CAS, if you have ever been a Crown Ward, if you know, you are disconnected from your family, you can't get it. So there's a few agencies that'll help you navigate that and try and do that for you. There's a cost for those agencies. I do it all the time. Nobody funds it. Nobody funds it. So that comes out of our budget to do that for folks. So the sustainable funding model needs to look at that. And I think the other big mistake is that there's experts in every field. And some of our agencies in Hamilton are just trying to do too much with too little. And that makes us not good at anything, right? Yeah. We need to focus on what we're good at and stay in our own damn lanes, and work collaboratively to support people. Dipping your toes in a billion things, if you're not prepared to do it, doesn't make a lot of sense. Our core focus is youth. And the reason for that is because we have the connections. We've been on the ground for the last 3 years in those parks, in those street corners, doing all those things, in the jails, all those places. So that has been our core focus, and that is what we do really well. And we don't try to play in the therapeutic world necessarily, right? We do a lot of language, we do a lot of mediation, we do circle with these guys, we do all this stuff. And, you know, we use some DBT strategies and some CBT strategies about behavioral change, but we don't do it in a therapeutic model, because the truth of the matter is that a good percentage of these kids have been through therapeutic models, and they're actually not going to sit through it. It doesn't work.
Yeah, you can't. You cannot. You cannot, because they don't trust it. Most of these kids have been institutionalized or in some way or another throughout their whole childhood, and they do not trust that model. They don't trust it. They want somebody to just like sit across from them and be like, okay, this is it. This is the real. You know what I'm saying? And you can reach them better that way than you can with any kind of institutionalized model.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things we need to get to when we're asking youth questions in order to figure out what it is they need to create a customized plan for them, right? But there's a way to ask that. And the way that we ask that is, yo, you want to go get a Slurpee at 7-Eleven right now? Okay, cool. I'm coming to pick you up. Let's go for a drive. I could have a whole lot of conversations in a car with someone for 5 minutes. Then rather than putting them in an office with glass walls and a pen and paper and staring at a piece of paper and having them check off boxes. And so you're going to get a lot more from someone when they feel comfortable in that environment and they feel space, and they don't feel like it's being threatened. So a lot of our assessments for some of these kids, we do that in 6 or 7 interactions out in a park somewhere, out on a street corner, whatever time of the day it is, before I could even fill out a paperwork that says, yeah, this kid is definitely in our lane, you know, or this kid needs a referral somewhere else, right? But asking those questions and getting to those questions, man, if you're not out here and they don't know who you are, good luck. Good luck. Because the system has been so broken for them for so long, you know?
And don't trust nothing or nobody.
No trust whatsoever. And for some of them, they've been bred with no trust in the system, right? Mom and dad went to jail, or mom was a user, or dad was a user. And they're just built with this, you know, perception that all police officers are bad, all social service providers are bad. All of those things are going to fuck up your life. And so breaking that barrier is really, really difficult. So you just got to find connection points, man. You got to find those connection points. You got to work. Instead of focusing on what's wrong in their lives, what is working in their lives and building off what is working in their lives. But you're not going to see change tomorrow, right? And that's the part that I think agencies are looking for stats, right? And they're not looking at people. They're looking at publicizing, oh, we housed 16 people. Oh, we did this for youth. We had 14 youth attend our programming. That's great. What'd you actually do? Because the truth of the matter is that we could talk about a million kids, Isabel, that you and I know that, you know, got picked up early on in their lives, did all the John Howard stuff, did all their court mandated requirements, and are right back on those street corners. And the reason for that is because we didn't actually get to the root cause. And once those mandatory court requirements were done, there was nobody addressing the other needs, and there was no referral process after that, because the justice system and the social service side don't talk to each other, because agencies all want freaking stats. So stop worrying about stats, work collaboratively about what makes sense for people, and build off of that. So sustainable funding models from both the province, the municipalities, the federal government, all need to look like collaborative opportunities instead of having all of us fight for the same money. How about we fight and put it in the places where it needs to for each individual
Absolutely.
Right? Where you know, if there's a $500,000 pot, it shouldn't be split up amongst the big 3 agencies. It should be, okay, here, you're going to get this money because you like logistically can manage it in your charitable profile, but you must include this agency and this agency and this agency to do this very specific work. And looking at the details of what everyone does. Nobody does what we do here with youth. There is a ton of models in the US. You could look at the Cure Violence model, which is the public health model that I talk about. You can look at agencies like Center for Justice Innovations or Court Innovations, ROCA. All of them basically use former gang members, messengers in community. They pay those guys to go out here and be social scientists, man. They are social scientists. They get you the data. They get you to places. You know, we're publishing a document very soon. It's called The 4 Reasons Kids Carry Guns, and the 4 levels of entrenchment. And that information is coming out soon. And that was based on a national study in the US. And guess what? I have 40 kids who have access to that on a regular basis. And I ask them the questions, where do you fit in this? Show me where you fit in this. So we didn't just make this shit up. We sat with them, we asked them the questions, and they were honest with us. And then there's data to support that all over the US, but in Canada, there is no data to support that. So We are undergoing some pretty heavy duty like data work right now with universities and with various organizations to sort of publicize some of that data that we have found over the last 3 years. So
yeah, I'm so proud of everything that you do, Jen. I have no doubt that it's going to go as far as it needs to go, because I know your determination and I know your genuine love for these kids. And I can't wait to see where it is in 5 years from now.
I appreciate
Makes
that.
me proud to call you my friend. I'm not even going to lie. Like, I love the work that you do.
You know what, Izzy, at the end of the day, you and I have both seen kids go through these systems out here and suffer. And as parents of, of their, they're our kids' friends, they're our neighbors, they're all those.
Yep.
And we try to be those messengers in our communities. But to be given the opportunity to do this now on a larger scale, like I quit a really good paying job to come here and do this, man. But guess what? I am happier every freaking day. I don't worry about it. Sometimes I don't have sleep for 3 days. Guess what? I don't give a shit. I still get to be happy when I come to work because I know the work that I'm doing matters. And me showing up at 3 a.m. fucking matters. And my team, the commitment from my team has been insane. Liz, who works with me, she came here and started this for free too. People were just willing because they were at other agencies and finding themselves barrier ridden with the amount of red tape they had to go through to support a kid. If you're registered with a college as a social worker, you can't give a kid a hug. You can't bring a kid into your office and alone, right? You can't put them in your car. You can't have a smoke with them. You can't let them smoke weed in front of you. Like, fuck off, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's just so barrier ridden that we need to reevaluate what the purpose of that mandated reporting thing was.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
A kid smoking weed to himself, could that be portrayed as harm to himself or harm to others? I guess that's how you portray weed. It depends. What is your version of marijuana? And so all of those pieces for me are just really, really confusing and outdated models. And the charitable model doesn't work either. Giving them everything and not expecting anything in return don't work either. We'll have a whole lot of kids. We have a whole lot of kids running around with a chip on their shoulder because the sense of entitlement is there because people have been handing them stuff all their lives. But there's a whole lot of kids who never got a handout here. So, we've got to get them to a point and just celebrating the real wins. We use words like gang exit. That's not real, man. They don't ever exit. All that shit stays in your body forever. Right?
Yeah.
All of those things stay in your mind forever. They stay in your heart forever. All of those things that you've had to do as part of a gang are in your body. They don't change. So there is no exit. So stop using the word, right? Because it doesn't exist. And don't create it as an expectation. The small win is the kid picked up the phone and called me today and he didn't shoot somebody. The small win is he showed up today to fill out a piece of paper to get a piece of ID. That's a win. So celebrate those little wins. Celebrate those little wins. When you celebrate the little wins, they will come to you when they are ready for the big wins. And the same thing goes with addictions. If someone came today and said, you know what? I didn't use as much as I did yesterday. Hell yeah, high five, man. I'm proud of you. Like the whole conversation, right? I didn't expect him to not use today.
Yeah.
Right? And maybe he goes in and has a chat with a doctor. Maybe he chooses not to go on substance use management program today, but he had a chat with a doctor. That's a big freaking win because he wouldn't have went in that office 6 months ago.
Yep. The seed has been planted.
So if you fix the little things, they will come to you for the big things. Celebrate the little things and stop focusing on these big end goals because they're just not realistic for people. People's lives aren't like that. I want $1 million house. I'm not getting it tomorrow. Like
it takes time to get them there. There's a lot of steps, right?
A lot of steps.
There's a lot of barriers that they have to overcome before they can even get there. And those are the things that we have to look at. Like we're having all of these expectations for these people, but we're not taking a look at all of the barriers that they are seeing.
Well, and the process isn't linear. That example I gave of going to rehab or going to detox and then going to rehab, the process isn't linear because the kid was ready. He went to detox. He got well, right? So now he's up higher on the scale. He's doing great. well, now we're going to send him back to shelter and he's going to go backwards and then I have to start over again. Right. But you have to have grace for those moments with people. If you just was like, oh, you didn't meet the expectations, I'm sorry, you're discharged from our program. Like, what did that do? What did that do? And that happens realistically.
Sends them spiraling right back down.
And so for those who are using substances and those with mental health concerns, the process is never linear. And we as workers need to understand that that is the case. And we need to have grace for those moments when people slide backwards in their real life and there is real things going on for them. And how do you support someone when they're at the bottom? You sure as hell don't walk away, man. You know? So you got to figure out how to do it. And you can't set timelines on that because everybody's process is different. The unfortunate part is, as social service providers, your funding models dictate you only have this much money for this many days, for this program, for that program. And you don't get to move that around and create these customized work plans for people. The luxury we have here is we made it. So we actually don't care. We will create customized work plans if that's what makes sense. But I will never, ever drag you. I will push you. I will pull you. I will not drag your ass. So figure out what you want. And I'm right here at the other end of the line when you need that. And that's exactly the language, pardon my French, but that's kind of like how we work with folks. And there is that expectation that that's the conversation. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love it. I'm like you. I not with all these rules and policies and that. I want to be able to be on the same level as them, and I'm there to, help them when they're ready, and whatever that looks like for them, because it's going to look different for everybody. The way they want their help and all that is going to look different for everybody. And I know from me just talking with people about my views on this kind of work and how I go about my work with my clients, I get some backlash and stuff at times. And so I could just imagine that you probably have experienced some backlash with the judgments and stigma and stuff like that. What do you say to those people that are, like to tear you down kind of deal?
Well, I think it's funny, we've been in the back burner, we've been pushed to the back of the room many a times. We've been pushed away from some of those community table discussions because everything we do is in gray. Like, it's not black and white, and people like black and white. But the truth of the matter is that I don't get any money from the city. The Salvation Army doesn't put money in my pocket. Mission Services doesn't put money in my pocket. Good Shepherd doesn't put money in it. So I don't give a fuck. I will do what I need to do, because it's my private funders and the folks that support us and support this model that are doing this. Now we have some provincial funding, but we've done it as a test grant to prove that we're right in the fact that some of this isn't working because we're just not trying anything different. So, I've had the luxury of, yes, we have some very strong rules as an organization about working collaboratively with other people, and we're trying really hard to do that. We've invited people to the table. We've had various discussions. We take the lead on, community projects whenever we can to net ourselves in with people who do work that's different from us, because it does require all voices at the table. There is some really, really powerful moments of a charitable model. There's some really great things that all of those organizations I mentioned do, but that doesn't work for everyone. So finding your niche and sticking with your lane. And so I always tell people, we have something called an agency fit tool here. So when I'm evaluating a youth as to whether or not it's maybe someone who should be case managed by us, or maybe they're better served in a preventative type environment like AY or Boys and Girls Club, or, some of those organizations, then they're not mine, right? I'll support them. I'll be part of the case plan. I'll help you when they are. But they need to go over there. The kids that I need to focus on are the kids that nobody else wants to touch because everybody else is scared of them. And they're not allowed into agencies because really big agencies have really big policies, and really big red tape. And so I think for us, it's just staying in your lane and being committed to stay in your lane, and trying to involve as many people as possible. I can tell you that all of my referrals for these kids were getting denied. Every single one of them. That is why we did what we did and just created our own space. Mm-hmm. Because when we tried to do that, they were denied. They were deemed too high risk.
Yeah.
So the only option those kids have is jail, couch surfing, gangs. That's just how it is. Because nobody wanted to touch them with a 10-foot pole because they maybe had a fight in community, or they pulled a knife on someone, or their family's entrenched in the streets, or their family has a history of substance use, like, but you don't even know who the kid is, and you've put on paper that he can't come in your building, right? Have you ever had a conversation with him that lasted more than 5 minutes without being scared? And I understand fear, and it's okay that we're scared of that, but let's talk about it, because the only way to remove that is to actually have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
So if you follow us on Instagram, you follow us on LinkedIn, you follow us on, you're going to see a lot of information rolling out in the next couple of weeks about some work that's been really, really done in the US that very specifically narrows the type of work that we're doing, and talks about fear and talks about all of those reasons I said these kids are getting themselves looped into this. And one of two things happens. Well, I would say one of three things happens when these kids get involved in street entrenchment, no matter what level of entrenchment they're at. They can end up drug dealers, they can end up users, or they can end up dead or in jail. Those are the three options we have. And that's pretty scary. It's stark, but that's really the truth of what it is. So how do you mitigate any of those three things from happening? And so just making sure that you understand what your own individual work is as an organization, and where you are weak and where you need help, and recognizing those weaknesses in yourselves as people. There's a lot of kids where I'm like, I can't do it. It is not me. This, this needs to go somewhere else. I can't do it. But knowing when to say it's not a fit for you, recognizing your own weaknesses as an agency as well as a person, and being really self-aware of those things. And it doesn't mean that the answer is no from us, but maybe it's a no for right now, but here is where you need to go. And here, let me take you to your first appointment. It's not just a piece of paper referral and go over there. It's let me walk you through that, and let me get you there. And so we try and do a lot of that.
I love it. What do you say to the people out there who are just, people, and they're not an agency, but they want to give something back? They want to help in some way, but they're just like, how do I do that? Do you have any advice for those people out there?
Sure. You can do a couple of things depending on your willingness to be verbal, right? Right now, I think the biggest thing is talking about community safety as a public health crisis. I think that is, there is all kinds of buy-in, whether you're a leftist or a rightist or somewhere in the middle. Everyone understands that there is a rise in violence in communities. A rise in violence happens in communities when communities are poor, when communities are facing crises across the board. So speak to those crises. Which one of those is, passionate for you? Find a way to speak to those crises, whether it's an op-ed, whether it's a participation, whether it's a donation, whether it's any of those things, but find which one is passionate for you. But it is across the board, right? There's all kinds of agencies doing work in various spaces, the drug poisoning side, the mental health crisis side, but you got to be talking, man. The more voices that are at the table right now, the better. And really don't discount the voice of lived experience. I think politicians and social services and the media and all that sort of stuff has really discounted for a number of years the voices of people with lived experience. And it is actually what needs to frame social service policies moving forward, because nobody is a better messenger than the people who have had to live through it.
Yeah.
So I think it's really important to share those stories with each other, because the more we share and talk about it, the less we're going to stigmatize someone, because we actually heard it from them.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's a really important part for me.
I love that, because I've been saying that all along. We have all these politicians and these social workers and that who are, speaking for the people, but they haven't maybe experienced it themselves. So they don't really know what they're really speaking about sometimes. And they don't really ask the questions. They're not always asking the questions. They're not asking the right questions, like you're saying. And it seems like that's what you guys are doing. So I totally think it's amazing that you guys are doing that. And this is like why me and Isabel wanted to do this, was so that people can share their stories, so that people knew they weren't alone, and that, you know, just sharing your story will help someone else know that they're not alone, to know that there's another way, to know, you know, all of the things. And so I just want to again thank you for coming on and for all of the work that you do. I'm definitely gonna put all of your like social links and your website and everything in the show notes, so that anybody and everybody can follow you, reach out to you. So just a quick recap. Do you have to be a certain age, homeless, anything to come and use your
Yeah, so
services?
the 5 to 9 drop-in, like meal program or the clinic, there is no age restriction on that. Anybody can use those services. Anybody can make access to those services. The intensive case management program for youth is a very specific criteria. Those are usually done on a referral basis, or someone can send an email inquiry to our referrals email address that's on our website and ask if there's something we can do. Or they can ask whatever, you know, the guidance counselor at the school. They can ask the workers that they're dealing with. They can ask their CAS worker, is there any other programs that my kids could be doing? Is there a way for me to get involved in that? And those informations may trickle down to us, and we may be able to take part in it there. But if you have a general question like that, you can certainly send it to the referral email. But for that, that is kids 17 to 25. And the main criteria is that they've had to have some interaction with the Justice Department. And they have had some criminal activity, or at least are on the radar, maybe their peer group, that sort of thing. So, yeah.
Okay. And it sounds like you have a really safe and open space, and you don't have, if you're not judgmental, and maybe have a little laid back approach than, you know, where like I know you can't smoke in front of them. You can't, you know, you have any like be alone and this and that. They have so many rules, and you can't have a conversation with them, right?
Yeah.
It's got to be paper and pen on at the desk, and that doesn't work for majority of these kids. So I think that anybody and everybody that's listening to this, or that knows somebody, needs to really know that like that's the space they're going into, because it's a welcoming space and not one that you're probably used to going to. So to really try the hub and try, you know, Jen and all the staff out for sure.
Yeah. And ask questions to your friends, man. Like, ask people who we are, right? If you're not comfortable with that, ask the questions around, or just come visit us, right? You can have a smoke with me outside and have a conversation with me before you even make entry to my space, if that's what we need to do, right? You get to gauge for yourself. There's nothing forcing anybody to come in the building. There's nothing forcing any of that stuff. And you might come by here 5 or 6 times before you even make access to the building, and that's okay too. But you maybe learn some things about people in your community if you don't. If you do. So yeah, we definitely want people to come by and check it out, or check us out on the website, and ask your buddies, man. Ask your buddies. They know who we are.
I love it. Thank you so much. Do you have anything you want to say or add before we say goodbye?
Yeah, just that I love you guys for doing this. I think this is really important. It's coming from a different place than what we see in the world right now, because you're coming from the loss of a loved one and what that means. I think one of the pieces I think that's maybe missing from your team is maybe bringing someone in from the justice side, some people who, you know, have had some lived experience on the jail side and the trauma that's associated with the justice system. And having some conversations around that, because the truth is that's actually what affects all of us in the mental health and addictions piece, is that jail piece can really have a play on that. So let's bring in some of those voices too, but I'm always happy to watch and contribute to the discussion on this. So, you know, I'm sure there's more work to come. And I'm super proud of you guys, and it's really awesome. And I know this comes from a really special place. And I love that for all of you. So.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure. Isabel, anything you want to add?
No, just that I love you, Jen. You know, I love everything you do and the work that you do. I've seen you in action for a lot of years, so I know that anything you put your hands on is going to turn to gold. And yeah, like any way we can help each other out. Like I'm sure you have, you know, your little advices and connections that you could probably send my way, and I would do the same for you. Like, let's build a community for these people.
Yep.
That's what they need. They need community. So they need everybody working together for the same goal.
Yeah.
You know?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Let's get communities well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Community safety isn't about reduction of violence. Community safety is about making communities well in all the aspects. It's a very holistic approach, and we need to be looking at all of those things, including the cultural police, including what restorative actually means, including what mediation actually means in its practical environment, not in the context of the justice system, and how we use that in our own communities to build. You know, Indigenous folks had it right for a lot of reasons, man. And we need to really focus on some of those core pieces. Yes, there's ways to take those teachings and take those learnings and use them in colonized ways. And I get that, but also they can be really beneficial if done the right way. So I am all game for making communities well in all kinds of ways. So whatever we can do to support people, we want to do it within the context of our own budgets, restrictions, of course. But let's hope that that gets better. Let's hope we start talking to people as people and stop focusing on fucking stats, man.
Yeah, absolutely.
Exactly.
Awesome. Yep. Thank you so much, Jen. You guys have heard it here. If you guys have a story, have an idea, opinion, you remember what I say, your idea, even if it's small, somebody else might just go off of that. And yet next thing you know, your small idea is one great big, you know, result, action. So nothing is too small. Nothing is stupid. Reach out. If you have a story you want to share, come and share it. You are not alone. You will be able to help somebody, I promise you, if not just helping yourself. And so again, until next time, until next week, we will see you all then. And remember, and say it with me, you are somebody. Have a good one, guys.